Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to this session. I'm Sophie Chidikas, and I'm the Open Academy Junior Manager, and I'll be replacing Marta during her maternity leave. And so today I'll be your host. So thank you for joining us today and for being on time. My colleague Rachel is letting you guys in, and we're going to give you some time to get settled in. So before we start the presentation, I'm going to cover some important details for this session. So this session is going to last between 1 hour and 1 hour 30 minutes. It's being recorded now, and we'll do our best to upload the recording and the slides to the alumni private page as soon as possible. And for this session, you can mute your microphone until it's time for the Q&A. If you have any questions for the speakers, please type them in the chat, and we'll make sure to save them for the Q&A. You can also open the chat and introduce yourself with your name, where you're joining us from, your organization, and the disease you represent, and whether it is your first time as an alumni meetup or not. And during the Q&A, you can speak and ask questions, of course, and share your experience. And you can do so by raising your hand with the raise your hand feature, which is on Zoom, and we'll give you the floor at that moment. And if you have been in another Open Academy meetups, you know that we always launch a survey automatically after the Zoom meeting closes. And it takes only 2 minutes to fill it out. And it really helps us to improve how we deliver our training, assess your satisfaction, and help us choose topics for the future meetups. And if you cannot stay until the end, don't worry, we're going to put the link into the survey in the chat. So today we're very lucky to have Michaela Onali. Oh, my presentation doesn't... Oops. Is it working now? Yes. We have Michaela Onali, who is a patient representative at Equilibristi HIVM. And we also have Claudia Fuchs, who is our colleague and a drug repurposing project senior manager at Eurodis. So this meetup will provide an overview of how can patient organization advance in research on their diseases. And as usual, if you have any questions for them, you can type them in the chat, as I said, and we're going to have a Q&A session after the presentation and also a group discussion. Oops, next one. Yeah, so I have a couple of announcements before I hand over to Michaela. The call of applications for the schools of 2024 are still open, and you have 1 other week to apply. It closes on October 27th. And if you need more information or have any questions, please do not hesitate to contact us. I'm gonna put my email address and Rachel's email address on the chat so you can reach out to us. And also, please feel free to sign up for the next meetup, which is going to be on the 29th of November with our colleagues Jessie Dubief and Marita Francisco, who are both from our Rare Barometer team. And they will share some tips and tricks to develop evidence-based strategies, advocacy, and actions. So this is all from my side, and I'll stop sharing now. Oops. Voila. And I have handed over to you, Michaela.
Great, thank you very much. I will share my screen. Okay, you should be able to see, right?
Yes.
Okay, great. Hello, everyone. Thank you very much for joining this webinar. I must say it's always quite special to me because I was a patient. I'm a patient like you, and I participated in the the Eurordis Open Academy. So thank you so much for joining. I'm Michele Onali. I'm a patient, as I was saying, with a rare disease called gene myopathy, and I'm also a patient representative at a very small patient organization called Gli Equilibris HIBM, which is based in Italy. So what to expect from today? Just a brief overview of this webinar. We will discuss together on the major challenges for small patient organizations with a little focus in research, and we will explore together how to manage and coordinate a research project, how initiating and leading research instead of being just invited to join a consortium is something that we see often. Patient organizations are invited to join maybe last minute and as the last partner, and it's something that shouldn't happen, of course. Hopefully during the discussion as well, I would like to explore with you responsibilities as an advocate and as a patient representative in research. And then we will go from theory into practice on best ways to co-develop and co-write a research proposal. So once again, how from learning more about research and development, we can really go into practical examples and develop a research proposal. And in this presentation, I will show 3 major steps that I learned through my experience, and hopefully these learnings will act as tips for your activity as well for your disease. So as I mentioned, I participated as well in the Eurordis Open Academy training programs. I participated in the summer school in 2018 and in the winter school in 2019. And I also completed the Opati patient training program. So once again, I did all the path of being diagnosed with a rare disease, and then in little time getting to develop a research proposal for my own rare disease. So before we get into the heart of this presentation, I would like, of course, to learn more about you. And I need actually to thank you because the Eurordis team shared with me your expectations for this webinar. And they were really, really helpful to develop this presentation. So Sophie, if you like, we can start with the first poll. And the first question that I have for you is very simple. It's an open question, and we will look in the results after the presentation, but I would like to learn from you, in your opinion, what is the most important thing that you think is really, really, really necessary to make a research project concretely happen? You can say anything. It's very, very useful for me to understand, in your opinion, where you are stuck, and if this factor was present, you believe that research could indeed happen. So maybe through the help of Sophie, we can go into the Slido.
I've shared the link into the chat, so you can click on the link and give your response.
Thank you. So we will do this quickly. Just let me know, Sophie, I can see only my presentation at the moment. So you tell me
we have 7 people typing and 3 answers for the moment, 5 answers. We have 11 answers for the moment.
Okay. And I think we can leave this open as well later on, right?
Yes.
Okay, so maybe we can move to the second question. So this is something that you will see I will expand on during the presentation. And I was very interested to know for your disease, so for your rare disease, where and at what development stage you think efforts are currently mostly needed. So do you think research is mostly needed at the moment in basic research? So for basic research, I mean starting from zero, where you also learn of a biological target. This can be an enzyme, a protein, a gene. Or you are at a stage where preclinical research is needed, so animal models are needed and more in-depth research is needed on a new target. I want to know if, for example, you need efforts or funding to enter early clinical research. So in this case, entering phase 1. Or if you are at a stage of late clinical research. If you are unsure, of course, you can also select, I don't know. And I think we can also see the answers from this question.
I'm going to share that now.
Do you want me to stop sharing my screen, Sophie?
I think you need to do that. Yeah, thank you. It's going to be easy.
We can see it all together.
Perfect. Voilà. Can you see my screen?
It's loading. Okay.
Perfect.
Okay, so okay, so the first one, 21%. So I see, I don't know, preclinical research, entering clinical research. What is the first one, Sophie? The first 21.
There you go.
Okay, great.
Sorry.
Basic research. Okay. I don't know. Okay, as well. Late clinical research, 20%. Preclinical research, 13%. Entering clinical research, 13%. Okay, great. Actually, you are helping me a lot because I thought this was the case. And I developed my presentation exactly to see how we can support research earlier on and not just in late development stages. Would you like, Sophie? Yes, I can go back. And okay, you can see it, right?
Yes, we can see it.
Okay, great. So now we will explore more about the challenges and possibilities in research. So as a patient organization, so how can we really move from theory and so from being just a research participant to practice, so taking action as a partner and decision maker. So just a summary here, we all know about the main challenges, but I wanted to focus on this because the more we understand this, the more I think we can understand also, we can help researchers. So as you know, projects mostly fail or are dropped at some stage of the research and development process for many reasons. One of these can be, and it's very common in many rare diseases, is that disease models do not fully recapitulate the human disease. There are indeed academic and industrial collaborations, but these do not involve patients in early research stages. And then, so we are in a European context, and it's something that, of course, we all, as patient organizations, see. Funding is very difficult, and compared to North America, for example, we don't really have a fundraising culture, and we don't have financial hubs, for example, like Los Angeles, New York, where patient organizations organize big galas and they can make big fundraising. So we get to the point to say, okay, I'm a small patient organization, what can I do? We need to support research somehow. So In this presentation, we will explore how to generate interest and how to approach researchers, especially in academia and so in early development stages. More facts in here, I put just 3, but of course there are many reasons for having stagnation in research. One of these, and I want to point this out, is that too many products fail in phase 2, and this indicates that preclinical studies are very weak in predictivities. The population is not defined properly, and then of course once again there is no early patient involvement. So at this point you may wonder, okay, this is great, we know all of this, but where and how to start? The very first tip is for sure that it's important to identify the main actors at each research stage. So for example, looking at the comments your team shared with me from your registration pages, I didn't know, of course, who was the respondent. I could see only the comment. I could feel that many of you may think that the only source of funding may be industry, but this is not the case. So as we know, the development of novel findings in new drugs is not easy and requires many disciplines. So the very first tip in here is that a patient, especially with an expertise and with a knowledge on research development, has the responsibility to find and bring together different disciplines. Because it's very important that we involve the right expert at the right time to save time and money. So we will now go through to better understand where this should be done, at what stage, and how. So your question may be, okay, so how do you select your collaborators? Where do you find the expertise you require at a specific point in time of your research project? So in here, we speak about basic research, preclinical or clinical. When we speak about European funding schemes, like EJPRD, for example, that I will mention in this presentation, funders often offer a matchmaking tool, meaning that you can find the partner that you need according to expertise that you are looking for. And then something that I learned through my direct experience is that the more you learn and read about other rare diseases or research studies, the more you learn about disciplines and expertise that may work for your consortium as well. And this is exactly what happened in my case, and I will describe you more how that happened. So my very first tip to you would be of course, know where the efforts are needed. From the very first question, we realized that some of you may not know where efforts are needed. And of course, this is the very first step toward initiating and advancing research efforts for your disease. So in here, this is just a scheme about the road into the medicine development approval. We know this is made of basic research, lead discovery, preclinical development, and clinical development. So I would like to focus here the importance on basic research and why you need to interact with researchers as early as possible. So as you know, as I was mentioning during the poll, an initial target when you start research on a rare disease is identified. This can be a protein or a gene. After that, there is a validation phase, and this is about generating confidence about the relationship between the targets, so for example, the protein or the gene and the disease. After that, there is a compound screening, and the lead in research is identified and optimized. In this case, if a small molecule is discovered, you need really to understand if at this stage funders like industry or academia can justify drug discovery effort. This is because one of your questions was, okay, how can industry decide where to put money? The answer is exactly this, because it's very difficult to turn a small molecule, so a lead, into a preclinical candidate. So what happens after that? You select a candidate, and in here, you really see if it's possible or not for industry to proceed, and if there are the risks to proceed. The problem is that many compounds may be identified as candidates for clinical development, but then we see that there is a consequent failure in preclinical or clinical studies. And this is why it's important for the patient to get involved exactly here in basic research. Because if the disease is not well understood, and so also if the initial target and then the lead identification is not very well optimized, we can get at the end of the journey to then have a consequent failure. And it's something that we patients cannot afford. It's not just about funding, it's especially about time that we cannot waste. So the initial research, of course, there is data that is generated to develop an hypothesis. And in here, when there is an idea for a target, it's important to understand where the funding can come from. And my answer to this is that, of course, this doesn't come only from the commercial sector, but also from the academic and clinical research sectors. And in here, you need to identify researchers that are interested in your disease area and that can potentially be involved also in your disease. So the input is required from scientists from different disciplines and backgrounds, and one of these has to be your expertise of being in a patient and understanding the disease as best as anyone can. So we want to advance research, and we want to do it doing a project that is patient-led and initiated and coordinated by patients. So you may ask, okay, so what was your situation when you first did this? So I come from a context that may be similar to yours. My patient organization is run by only 2 patients, myself and the president. The maximum annual income we have is 5,000 euros. We have a lot of language barriers, and one of these, not only language, is that we have many expectations from patients, but patients do not wish to work in advocacy. So this makes everything extremely difficult. So just to give you a little bit of context on the objectives of my efforts in research. So I'm diagnosed with a disease called gene myopathy. This is a very ultra rare disease. The prevalence is 1 to 6 in 1 million. It's called gene myopathy because it has mutations in a gene called GNE, which initiates and regulates a sugar called sialic acid. So my first objective was to see if we could explore more this biosynthesis pathway. So the community needs, of course, are different, and we needed more research and more funding, and especially more transnational collaboration. So in the drug discovery journey, as I was mentioning before, especially in the early stages of the research, you need to identify more disciplines. And in here, you can have chemists, regulatory experts, of course, also clinical experts, and especially also drug metabolism specialists. Because you will see now from my next slides, our biggest problem was that we couldn't develop a drug which could be absorbed and have the efficacy that we expected in the clinical stage of research. So what happened? We spoke about failures, and this is exactly what happened for gene myopathy. So in 2017, a late development stage research failed exactly in phase 3. And as you can imagine, this is a failure that an ultra-rare disease with no efforts at all cannot afford. So this did not meet its primary endpoints. We think we have many reasons for that. And my objective was to target those and especially to learn from these lessons to restart from. So I noticed a publication from Cardiff University, and I contacted these researchers who were working on a so-called prodrug, which is a way to, so it's an innovative way to deliver the enzyme and make sure that this is better absorbed by the body. So I contacted them, and we decided that it was the case to give a chance to this project. What they explained to me is that this publication was developed thanks to a pharmaceutical company who eventually changed the pipeline. So decided that they needed to invest in a different disease area, and that's how they dropped completely these research efforts. I thought this was the great opportunity to show that indeed our patients and patient organizations can work to make sure there is not stagnation of research, as I was mentioning before. So we thought about involving more people, and we thought it was worth to embark into a project proposal for EJPRD. And in here you see many pictures of us meeting after the project was eventually funded. So how I started contacting people. So I need to be honest, I was completely alone in this. So before that, I was really reading a lot about other rare diseases. I learned about other rare diseases like Duchenne, for example, during the Open Academy training courses. And I thought that it was important, you know, to learn from their experience and to make sure that we didn't waste time and especially funding. So I started to look into an EJPRD call, and that's how, as I explained, I contacted Cardiff University. After that, I contacted the University of Cagliari in Italy, and we all agreed that it was worth the effort. I saw that, especially in our disease, omic technologies were not really used, and I thought that the metabolic aspect of this muscle disease was not well explored, and that's how I decided to approach researchers with expertise in metabolomics or in medicinal chemistry, because I saw that this was missing. And that's how, in the end, I identified the people to contact. So the expert in metabolomics never worked on gene myopathy before. So I chose him because of his expertise and because it's a reality that in rare diseases we cannot really find expertise. So we need to shape this expertise and bring in into other our disease. After that, I involved a clinical researcher. This researcher is an expert in GD myopathy because he also led the clinical trial which failed. And then this was another expert in the sialic acid mechanism, so the sugar I wanted to study. And then we also involved another researcher in Portugal, once again with no expertise at all in GD myopathy. So as you can see, the idea started from the patient at the center, initiating and leading all efforts to then start a research called ProGenie to develop a prodrug for GD myopathy. So the very first, second tip that I will suggest is, of course, to identify your objectives. It's very difficult to propose an idea if you don't have clear objectives in mind. So to give you an example, the objectives in ProGenie was once again to develop a project, a preclinical research project, develop an improved substrate replacement approach. So I didn't want to stop, and I want to improve where the previous clinical trial failed. So I wanted to put efforts toward improving drug absorption and therapeutic effect, because there were many gastrointestinal adverse events which eventually didn't help absorption of the drug. Identify biomarkers, in rare diseases is very, very complicated, but more research is needed toward this, and especially a multi-omic approach of research, meaning involving different omic technologies, like, for example, metabolomics, proteomics, lipidomics, and so on. And the fourth objective was to model GD myopathy in zebrafish, because we were not successful in mouse models, and there have been efforts for the past 20-25 years, and still now we don't have a mouse model replicating the disease, and so the phenotype of GD myopathy. So as you can see, many challenges to tackle. The third tip that I would give is then, of course, since we need funding, is to identify a possible call for funding. But this is not enough. You need to take the time to reason on the criteria and requirements of the call. So the call we participated in too was aimed at developing preclinical research to develop effective therapies for rare diseases. So the European Joint Program on Rare Diseases is now closing soon, but hopefully this same kind of calls will be published again. In our case, this was open to teams from countries with national and regional funders. So this is very important. You need to include in the proposal countries that are already funded by their government, their national government, for example, or in general by the regional funders. And you need to include a minimum of 4 teams. So imagine the difficulties. In Europe, there was no expertise at all, and I needed to form a team with researchers who I knew couldn't have the expertise in GD myopathy, but I knew this expertise needed to be developed, right? So the funding comes also from the European Commission in this kind of calls, and for patient advocacy organizations, there was an amount of 50,000 euros per consortium. It means that, for example, if there were 5 patient organizations involved in the consortium, each of them would get 10,000 euros. So the amounts were really, really low. So the proposal submission is, of course, something very tricky, not only for us patients, but researchers especially. In this kind of calls that the success rate is below 10%. So you can imagine how low the probabilities are to be funded. But once again, I think if we were not funded, I realized later on that it was a great opportunity to build mutual trust and long-lasting relationships among the researchers I also didn't know. So I would strongly suggest you to make an attempt also for this kind of relationship development opportunities that co-writing a proposal can bring. So the European Joint Programme on Rare Diseases, once again, what can you expect, you may say? You may wonder, but this is really, really complicated. What do they ask in these proposals? How can I really contribute to this? I don't have a scientific background. So this sort of calls are divided into a pre-proposal stage and a full proposal stage, meaning the most successful proposals are invited to present a widest proposal among many of them. So for example, among 10, generally 20, 30 pass to full proposals. And in here, I wanted to list here what is asked. And I think it was very important for me to underline this to you, because even if, for example, your patient organization has a very small amount of money to afford even a very small basic research project, it's important that you, as a funder, for example, let's say you have 40,000 euros to work on basic research, it's important that also the researchers present a proposal which outlines, preliminary results, a wide description of a working program. And of course, it's very important that the main hypotheses are described and that the proposal show that indeed the project is feasible to continue and is feasible for the budget that will be invested. Along with this, of course, there is risk management to address, and it's something that during the co-writing of the proposal, I also contributed to, because I was thinking about the reviewers who were thinking about a project which was going to be funded for an ultra-rare disease, and they couldn't afford, of course, waste of money or risks in that sense. To sum it up, I think that you all can contribute from point 1 through to point 8, because you know the disease and because now you know about research and development. And you know what is needed for your disease. So at this stage, of course, the consortium makeup is very difficult, as I was explaining before. Some researchers may also not answer to your emails, but you need to be determined and also to find not just ways to be heard, but also other opportunities to contact maybe other researchers if one specific researcher didn't answer to you. And that was the case for me as well. So I would suggest, of course, before contacting your first partner, is that you need to look into the feasibility of the submission of the proposal. The deadlines often are short, and of course the call for proposals need to be understood also by the researchers that would like to join you in this endeavor. You may have more time with the pre-announcement, so this kind of calls generally are also characterized by a pre-announcement in which the call criteria are described, and you can start brainstorming about possible opportunities for your disease. As I was mentioning before, They may offer a partner finding tool, which can be available and helpful for you if you don't know who to contact. And my suggestion, because you need to think about the future of research for your disease, you need to involve early career researchers, because if these researchers learn and become experts, they will be the researchers you want to see in the next 5, 10, 15 years for your disease. And of course, it's very important to involve also researchers from smaller countries, because we need to remember many of our patients are also in those countries, and it's very difficult to develop expertise. And of course, it's very important. You also need to identify very well the role you want to have in this proposal. If you want to lead and coordinate research efforts, this needs to be quite clear to the researchers. And it's very important to identify where the patient can really be helpful and should be involved. So, of course, all of these are very difficult factors that lead to initiate and research project, especially as a patient like us, right? So I understand perfectly. One of the first things that you may be thinking now is that your idea will never be taken seriously. Or you may be thinking that you are not a scientist, so these ideas or even a project proposal like the one I described may be too big for you. You may also think it is not worth the effort because of the success rate. Like me and my disease, you may have a very small number of experts in participating countries. As I was mentioning, the deadline is always a big problem to submission, of course, to complete submission of a proposal. We know we work as a patient representative on a voluntary basis, so time is a big constraint. And of course, I could have thought quite easily that it was too complicated and it was not worth the effort because of the numbers and the rarity of my disease. I'm going to show you this because I didn't let any of this stop me to initiate a research proposal for my disease and then eventually succeed, thanks also to the collaboration with the other researchers in the team. So how to coordinate and manage a research team and position yourself as a primary partner, not just a worthy partner, because you are the primary partner, you are the patients. So for especially the ones new to your disease, so it's very difficult to approach somebody who never studied your disease before. It's important that you make the idea interesting and stimulating. If you feel stimulated by this idea of yours, I'm sure you can transfer your motivation to the researchers because they need also to be stimulated. And the problem is that they also spend a lot of time writing grant proposals. So they pick grant proposals that not necessarily are guaranteed to be successful, of course, but that may be interesting for their field of work. Be present. This is very important. Don't let, let's say, difficulties stop you. Be present, send emails, also during the co-writing of the application. Make sure that you ask questions, you clarify where you want to be involved and how. Because you shouldn't underestimate, of course, your motivation and the value of your ideas. Another thing, when you communicate with researchers, you now, because of the Open Academy, you know that you have the biggest foundation, and along with the information that you gathered, and with all the things that you learned about research and development, you can show that the added value is that you live the disease every day. Your questions are always valuable, your points are always valuable, and that eventually may be to the development of an improved medicinal product. Very important. So going back to the first question, if we want to initiate a research proposal, it's very important that you also follow and understand very well what research efforts there are worldwide. So, of course, I need to be honest, this requires a lot of your time because you need to follow, you need to read publication, and you need to dedicate a lot of your free time to make sure that you know as much as possible. In the consortium I work in, there are also many students, young researchers who approach me and they tell me, okay, so I didn't find this in this publication. Can you help me understand if this was explored? Can you help me understand if this indeed it's important that we look further into? And this is exactly, for me, the major example of full collaboration with researchers. And another added point, you may also have the experience as a research participant, so you know eventually what didn't work in a failed clinical trial, so you can say what to improve. And of course, you go beyond statistics because we cannot find all data in publications. And you are a patient advocate, so you collect all the individual experiences and needs in a very wide community. And of course, you know about research and development. So I hope this could motivate you to start a project for your disease. There are of course more materials online that you can explore. One of these is the short guide on patient partnerships, which was developed by a working group at Eurordis in collaboration with the European Joint Programme on Rare Diseases. And you can find it on the EJPRD website under our actions and services and patients in research. So you can have a look. In this guide, we list all the stages, but also questions that are important a researcher answers to understand if indeed the patient is well involved in an early research project. And then last week, actually, it started also the last round of the EJPRD MOOC on translational research for rare diseases that I would suggest to explore because it's very interesting, in my opinion, because it goes a lot into detail about the basic and preclinical research side of things, which I think we patients lack, and we need more knowledge about in order to be involved and to also develop ideas and proposals to other researchers. So we can now definitely discuss more about your ideas and your problems at the moment in your disease. If you are interested, we will have also a final Progeny Public meeting where we would like to share exactly how this project started, was developed, and how patient involvement made it possible. So if we have any questions or comments? Maybe Sophie, you can help me.
We don't have any comments in the chat, but if you have a question, you can raise your hand. And maybe we can have a look at the open question, the results of the open question.
Sure, yeah, absolutely.
Yeah? I'm
yes.
going to share my screen. Perfect. And then present.
So yes, the first question was, what is the most important thing you think is necessary for a research project to concretely happen? Funding, research, collaboration, sufficient basis to get funding, find a researcher, okay, support from other stakeholders, money, awareness, funding, so more funding. Okay, so my question is actually to you now. Do you think if my patient organization or any other stakeholder involved in my research project had funding, do you think we could potentially succeed in such a research proposal if I wasn't involved? Or do you think it could ever happen to address the right unmet needs and the right gaps in research? I could even ask this question to one of the PIs, because I invited one of the PIs to participate. Fabrizio, are you there? Oh, surprise.
Of course I am.
So I invited Fabrizio. I don't know if you recall from my presentation. Fabrizio works at Cardiff University. He's a medicinal chemist, and he's exactly the first researcher I contacted 3 years ago. And who explained me why the research couldn't go forward for the reasons I explained, that pharma eventually changed the pipeline and decided that it wasn't worth to continue investing. So maybe I would redirect my question to you, Fabrizio.
Mm-hmm.
Where do you think which more successful factors would you identify related to eventually the funding of this proposal or project?
Well, first of all, you need to identify where you're going to find the funding. Because nowadays, especially at the big organization like EGPRD, that require the involvement of the patient, and this is also effectively in every charity organization, they're funding research. So in every charity that's funded research, you need to have a patient involved for 2 reasons. First, for the expertise the patient can give it to you, because that is really important for us scientists to better design the drugs, in my case, or how to test the drugs and so on. Also because funding is important, and you need to reach as many people as possible in order to get more funding, more people involved. And this is really key. And the patient is really good to mitigate the gap that we scientists have, because sometimes we are too technical. It's too difficult for us to explain. That something for us is very easy, for many other people it is not. And I think the patient is a key link in help the scientist to explain better what we do and involve much more people. So this is a key part for a patient to be involved. As a matter of fact, thanks to Michela, was also involved in the charity muscular dystrophy in UK. I got a contact for another patient. Then with the help of this patient, I'm able to set up another project with another muscular dystrophy again. So it was really important, the connection. You guys are really important to connect scientists, because sometimes we send an email around, I'm involved in this, I'm involved in that, but we don't have a response because they either are too busy or too many people involved and so on. And the patient sometimes can be a very key link to bring the scientists together. We may not have the possibility to engage each other, but with the help of the patient, we can have a better communication, a bigger group. That I think is the key important, because nowadays, whoever is going to give you money, either a charity or the government or a company, they want to see a group of people with expertise in the research. Basically, they want to have a clear answer to this question: do they have the expertise to succeed in the project? If the answer is yes, you will get the money. If the answer is not, you won't get the money. Even if you're in your field, you will be the best. That I think is the key part. Did I answer your question, Michela?
We have actually Christina, who would like maybe to add. I would like to speak less now, and I will leave actually the floor to all of you guys. Christina.
Just in connection to what Fabrizio said, I totally agree with him to be involved in every single step of research anyhow, as patient advocates or as patient speakers and patient experts. I always struggle with those words, those names we are using for this position we are taking, because in my disease, it's HHT, it's a rare disease of vascular malformations. For years, I recognize that the clinicians do not see us as experts. They know we live with this disease, but at least we are patients. And so if there is some research somewhere in the VASCAN, for example, in the European rare network we have in the urn, it's not possible to be involved from first point on. They don't let us. So this is something I struggle with, how to position myself or other patients who are involved in this very strongly, very deeply, and who learn all those things we are talking now, and they don't accept it anyhow.
If I can say, Christina, I must say, as a patient, as a stakeholder involved, the clinical stakeholder group is the most difficult one.
Yeah, this is my experience.
Yes, whereas the researchers, I think, are easier to approach because they never see the patients. So they want to see exactly and give a face to what they are working on. So that's why also today I wanted to distinguish the differences between the different areas of research, because it's also true that when we enter clinical stage, yes, clinical patient involvement is very important, but in that stage, of course, the role of industry is really, really primary, right? Whereas before in research, academia has the primary role of bringing a potential drug to clinical stage. So I think they need to become our first partners. And from my experience, they were the easiest to reach and to approach. And I think if Fabrizio would have never answered to my email, we would have never got to this point. So indeed, yeah. And I underline it all the time, but I had also researchers who didn't answer to me. So that happens, but you need to insist. And I think developing a very clear idea of what you want to achieve and what you want to improve, because we are here to improve research efforts that eventually fail. And that's exactly education that is helping us to do so, right? Because we can also communicate. Fabrizio and I communicate because I understand now certain things about research. It's a matter of fact. I may explain it in a different way, but we communicate and we get to not a solution, because we don't get solutions quite easily, but to the next step, because we agree on the next step to take together. Yeah.
Yeah, if I can add a little bit to what Michaela says. At some point, Michaela, you mentioned to early career research. Those are really key in getting contact with, because as full professor, very big names, most of the times it's not they don't want to communicate, but they don't have the time. You know, me and Michaela collaborate, you know, we communicated very well, but I remember I replied to your email, not immediately, probably a couple of weeks after, because again, sometimes, especially if you're teaching and so on, you are overloaded by emails, and these kind of tend to be, you know, overlooked a little bit. So persistent is really good. If someone doesn't reply immediately, keep asking, because at some point it must be due just to, you know, a huge amount of email. At some point, you know, someone will reply. Persistence is a key. But early career researchers are the one that probably get the best chance to be involved, because you know, they want to do research. They are younger, they are motivated, they are full of energies, and they really want to succeed. And any opportunity is really good to, you know, to grow as a scientist in a certain field and so on. So early career research, I think this would be the first contact point I would go if I have to look for someone. Even from the scientific point of view, as a scientist, I would prefer to collaborate with at least one or two young researcher rather than go straight away to the big professor, because you will always be probably not the first priority. That also comes from my experience.
Yeah.
Can I eventually add to this? So I was before joining Aurorius, I was an academic researcher, exactly in the same position as Fabrizio is now, and I have worked on a rare disease for almost 20 years. And when we started, we worked on a completely different disease, and one mother knocked on our door and said, "Find something for my daughter." And we really started from the scratch without money, putting some money of the other project on this new project, working on this new gene, on this new protein, and we developed everything. And I would add to what Fabrizio said, involving the early career researchers, I absolutely agree on this, and not going only for the labs with the big names. It's not necessary in these labs the great research is done. Only because they are overfunded and get a lot of money and are super famous, they are not doing great research all the time. Yeah. So please, as Michaela explained, look at similar diseases you have, what is done in the field, look at papers, look at publications, and start to knock on the doors. Yeah. And what in my case was, so this mother came not to us with a really specific project. She only wanted something to cure or to treat her daughter. And we developed a project with her. So we made her understand that we first need to do some basic research, because we really started from the scratch. Nothing was known about the function of the protein and of the gene. And we came up with some therapeutic proposals at the end. So please really try to engage as many researchers as you can. I think this is, and don't be afraid if you get a no. Maybe they are not ready at the moment. Ask someone else, but really look at what's out there and what could be eventually feasible for your association or for your organization.
Yeah.
Thank you, Claudia. Goran.
Yes. So I have a question for you. I'm used as project managers with budgets, but within the IT industry. So I'm a bit curious, how much research and so on do you actually get for 50,000 euro? To me, it sounds like, well, it should cost a fortune to do that type of research. Could you tell us how it actually works with these guys?
You mean, Goran, are you referring to the 50,000 I mentioned on my slide?
Yes.
So that was for the patient organizations. And in here, I make a call for you guys as patient advocates, because I realize we have a big gap in the sense that funders identify a budget mostly because they don't know what patient organizations can do for a research project. So in our case, there was only one patient organization, mine, because we didn't have other patient organizations in Europe. I worked on a voluntary basis for the first 1.5 years, and the other I got paid for coordinating a project mostly. But of course, the amounts were minimal because we need to pay for travel, we need to pay for patients who come to our meeting and so on, and it's nothing at all. I can tell you that EJPRD eventually did not give the complete 50,000 euros, because in the end, some patient organizations may have not needed it. So the question is here, if we involve patient organizations, are they really aware of the role they can have in a research project? Because the feedback that then is given to the funders is that that money is not needed. And we risk going backwards. And I'm quite concerned about that, because in the last 10 years, we did so much about patient involvement. And I feel that as patient advocates, as patient organizations, we have a big responsibility. And as funders, because we are not all educated patients, eventually a small patient organization with no expertise in research and development will be involved, because they have to be involved. That's the way it has to be. We are not experts in research and development, but I think there should be a system, a mechanism in which other patient organizations can support this patient organization to understand or accompany them to have a bigger role and make sure that the funding available is used fully and totally. Yeah.
Okay, so if I understand you correct, the amount of money that you mentioned, that was supposed to cover the patient organizations' involvement, like travel and all of these things. Okay, then I got it. Otherwise, I thought, how on earth can you do some research with that little money?
I mean, you can decide how to use it, like in any other research project. For example, for me, it's a management communication coordination role. So,
Yeah.
And then you have other expenses, like,
Okay, thank you very much.
Of course. But it's minimum if then there are more patient organizations. 10,000, 20,000 is nothing also for travel for 3 years almost. Oksana.
Yes, hi everyone. I wonder, I have a question. Maybe it's not so, maybe it's a little bit silly question, but who measures patient expertise when how it's like some skill, some who measure patient expertise? And for example, in different countries, this patient expertise can be different. And how it's work, because always I ask people speak about quality of life. What quality of life means for different people, different is quality of life. Yes, the same with expertise. How it's work.
I think it's not working, and that's the problem, because also researchers have difficulties identifying where expert patients are, and it's very, very difficult. I will make you a very recent example. Actually, it's a regional example. There were some patient organizations who were trying to develop a new clinical guidelines in my region. And we were almost ending up developing clinical guidelines which were not the way they should have been. And there is also the thinking that you involve the patient, so researchers, clinicians, you're involving the patient, so you are doing your part. So it's very difficult for every stakeholder to understand which patient to involve and how, again. So it's very difficult to give an answer to this, actually, Oksana. Maybe Fabrizio, I mean, it was your first experience when I approached you, but how would you understand if a patient is an expert also in medicine development and so on?
Well, in my opinion, it doesn't need to be an expert in the medicine. What is really important is the experience that the patient has in a trial, in taking a medicine. This kind of the more information we get, the more informed decision and steer our research we can do. It doesn't need to be an expert in in medicine or in drugs and so on. Is the patient experience that is really important. For example, in your case, Michaela, if your Manax working or not, under which conditions, that's a kind of information that sometimes are difficult to get through conventional way, through a paper and so on. When you speak with patients, speak with people that are actually taking the medicine in a clinical trial, while they're experiencing in clinical trials, or even taking the medicine, that will give a huge help in designing the molecule or in testing the molecule and so on.
Thank you.
Does this answer your question?
Thank you so much. Yeah.
Do we have any other questions? There's no questions in the chat. If you have another question, yeah, Don, you can go ahead. Don.
We have one.
Yeah.
Again, it's the question of expertise on the patient side is something I would not define like you have to prove it. It's something you can find out if you see that a patient is able to look over his own table and talk about problems patients from this disease have. I'm not talking from my life with my disease when I'm talking about it. I'm talking about what I experienced with other patients, what a big sum up of different problems we recognize in living with our disease. And I think this is one first point. It's not me talking to a clinician or to a researcher to explain what my special problem is. It's talking about what makes this disease so difficult to live with. And the other point is, I would appreciate if there could be a kind of approval for this, but I'm sure it will always fail against the medical study of a clinician. So they do not, I can't say they, most of them or a lot of them do not recognize what it means to be an expert in living with something you did not choose. He chose to study this. I did not choose to be a patient in this disease. It's just my life. And I experience things if I want to or not. And I collect this experience. And so do all the other patients. And if we are able to bring them together to think about what does it mean for drug development, for newborn screening, yes or no, for different points in our history as patients, I think this is enough. We need to know to to be experts somehow. And it's depending on the research which is done, how much of this is needed. Most of the time, I agree with Fabrizio, it's enough to explain how this or that could change our lives or our influence, the influence of the disease in our life. So this is what we need to explain. And I think there should be a way. I always struggle with, we have the wording of patient journey and patient, what is the different word for the clinicians always describe how we have to pass through the clinician process when we are diagnosed, when we get this treatment, when we get this drug, and what happens at least. But this starts much earlier. This starts when I'm first suffering from something this disease does to me or my body. And in this point, my patient journey starts, not later on when I'm diagnosed. And so there's a wider field of what I get as experience. And this is important to explain to clinicians or to researchers that this is a field where I am an expert on somehow. And I think we need to bring this, written down or to explain it somehow to clinicians mainly, and maybe to other people as well. To be aware of what this means to be a patient expert. Every patient at least is an expert, but not everyone is willing to talk about or to share this with others, and to spend a lot of time on this and to learn some things more.
Very true. Very true. We cannot expect every patient to invest time in education, in advocacy. Absolutely. Yeah. One thing, and then I will, we have also Sami with a question. If this can help, one thing that I heard from one of the researchers high involved in this consortium was, they told me, you know, Michela, before you, honestly, I was almost afraid to interact with a patient, because in basic preclinical research, our researchers feel the pressure by almost listening to the story of a patient, right? They say, I don't know how to respond because I feel that I need to give answers, and they are not really used to this, and it's difficult also for them, of course. So the moment that you show that you want to work together, not to have an answer tomorrow, but to work toward an answer that may come in time, then the collaboration starts in a smooth way, and they get to understand also what it means to work with patients. Sami.
Hello, I have issues with the video, so I'm sorry.
No worries.
There are several questions I have. One is, who do you contact, clinicians or researchers? Because researchers are not really clinicians. This is a different kind of animal, I'm sorry. I mean, researchers are mostly biologists, and basically they are not seen by patients. Clinicians are the ones which are seen by patients, but they are not really the ones who develop the products. They are just the interface to the patient.
That's why you need to involve all of them together, Sami.
Okay, but how do you start? Because the clinicians are fairly solicited, you know, because they do test. Everybody wants to get into a trial or whatever. So these people speak more than others. They are meeting the patient organizations, but finally, they are not the ones who are doing real research.
Well, in our consortium, we have a clinician who was the PI of a previous clinical trial. So his expertise is being a neurologist. So, and an expert with gene myopathy in our case. So it was important that we brought in a clinician in a preclinical trial. And he's actually the one who makes proposals on how to proceed and make sure that we indeed eventually get to potentially in a clinical development stage by doing this and that in preclinical research.
Okay, so you're saying basically you need the clinicians first of all.
Absolutely, yeah. As you said, Sami, because the clinician sees the patient and knows how the disease progresses in time. And you have their expertise and also the patient who can tell, because we don't really have much natural history studies about rare diseases, right? So even the clinician can see 5, 6, 7 patients. And then you involve the patient and the patient speaks with 20, 30, 40 patients and can tell you more about that disease and can tell you that one patient progresses in a way, the other progresses in another way, and the drug should be developed to address different levels of progression at different rates. And that's what happens in preclinical research. You shouldn't develop a drug that addresses only a part of the patient community, right? You need to address and help all patients in different stages of the disease or severity. And that's where the patient comes in and is representative about their disease.
Thank you.
Of course.
Can I only add another thought about this? I think collaborating from the early beginning, even in basic research with clinician and patient, is essential, because also the preclinical research or the basic researchers can change and reshape their research questions given to the inputs they have from clinicians and patients. I think this is really essential that you start from the beginning with a multi-stakeholder consortium with different point of views to really define the research question and the patient journey or the journey you want to move on all together. You cannot exclude no one from the beginning. Dawn has another question. I see the hand raised.
My Wi-Fi is not well, so I'll leave the video off, sorry. I work globally. I represent 7 NGOs, 3 of which are in Europe, and we're having a really hard time. We have the patients, we have a natural history registry of these patients. We've done the work, we've been around for many, many years. We do not have the funding. We don't have a staff. We don't have anyone but mothers and fathers spending 5 minutes here, 10 minutes there, trying to run international organizations. And we have everything available for research. We have researchers around the world who are clamoring to work with us, but they want us to do all of the grant writing. They want us to bring in the research money to pay for their budgets. Not only do they want us to do all the grant writing to cover their expenses, they want us to write letters of recommendation for any grants they're doing solely for their own work. And the burden upon the patient parents is astronomical. So we're trying to fundraise, we're trying to grant write with no grant writing experience to write a Gates grant, which is just so overwhelming. But we have the collaboration, we have more than one organization, we even have more than one rare disease working together. What do you do when you're backed in a corner, knowing you have all these possibilities and everything lined up and you've done all this work, but you don't have the manpower or the time to put it together when it's all about money? Where do we find resources to be able to have the people to do the work when everything else is done. It's very frustrating for our team, and we're looking around and we don't have time to do galas and fundraisers. And after COVID, none of that works, to be honest. We spend more time investing in those things than to actually bring in any money. And everyone has other jobs and sick children, but we don't want the research to sit there because we have children dying. So what do? How do we back ourselves in a corner where we have all this data and all this work, and we've done all this homework, but we don't have the bandwidth to do anything with it? So what do we do?
What surprises me is actually that researchers who potentially would like to be involved refuse to co-write an application with you. Because if the money and the funding goes also for their work, it should be their responsibility to contribute to the co-writing of a proposal, like it was our case. I mean, of course, I didn't write the proposal myself because, you see, we needed to, I don't have a scientific background. Of course, I cannot expand scientifically on the hypothesis of a scientific project. I can contribute to the writing of everything around this, but also the other scientists were contributing to the co-writing. So if you have patient organizations based in Europe, I would suggest you to explore these EU funding opportunities and gather researchers who, as in the case I explained, are willing to co-write an application, because the responsibilities of all.
I agree. And they are wonderful at co-writing research publications. We co-author with them often. However, they literally are looking at us going, but we should have tried for a Gates grant, and we should have tried for NIH and NHS and all of these things. And by the way, can you please set up biobanking for us also? And they're looking at us to do all the fundraising and all the data collection, and now a biobank. And we don't have the resources to do that. And it's so stressful. But there's nowhere really to turn, because if they're not holding up their end of the bargain, and where do we go? I mean, are there any other resources to go to so that we can create the infrastructure so that we can handle all of this work?
Yeah, as I mentioned, you start from, since you don't have the funding, he has to start from an application proposal somehow. But once again, if the collaboration is not there even before the project is funded or is in place, I wouldn't see really anything positive happen if the collaboration is not there right at onset, at the beginning.
I agree. The collaboration is there for the research and for the data and publications and that sort of thing, but for funding, we're finding researchers are so greedy with their resources and their time. They don't want to help patient orgs. They expect us to give them money. They don't expect to give us money to help us have the bandwidth to do the work that we're doing. And we don't know how to combat that attitude with the researchers.
Yeah. Is this happening? Where exactly? Where are you based?
Our main headquarters in the US, but we're also registered in the UK, Switzerland, and the Netherlands. But it seems to be a global issue. And especially because we're US based, everyone assumes that we have money. We don't have money. We don't. I mean, we literally, parents are paying for overhead out of our own pockets. We don't have the money. So it's this illusion that everyone has, and we don't know how to overcome that without burning out our entire team and then watching the research just dissolve.
Yeah, I believe it's indeed the illusion that you have the money and that's how things are done, but that's not the case for all patient organizations. And it's a reality that not many understand, indeed.
Yes.
Yeah.
It's such a waste. It's such a waste of time and research opportunities.
I agree. So it's 5:30. I will leave to you guys.
Yeah, I think we don't have any other questions, and we went a bit over time. But thank you very much for staying that long, and for the presentation, Michele. It was very interesting. And thank you for your input also, Fabrizio.
Oh, you're welcome.
And,
You're many welcome.
And Claudia too.
I threatened him. No, that's not true.
Have a lovely evening, everyone, and
Thank
see
you,
you
guys.
very soon.
Thank you very much for having
Thank you
us.
very
Bye-bye.
much.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye bye.